to get in the huddle with your host, Charles Prodigy Richey, here on the Mass Steel Podcast.
This thing belongs to Mr. Roney, belongs here, and let's see if we can bring this damn thing back in next year, along with the Super Bowl. Here we go.
The game is over. The Pittsburgh Steelers did it the hard way.
With the 10th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Devin Bush, linebacker,
And welcome everybody to this edition here of the Mass Steel Podcast with me, Charles Prodigy Richey. And right now I got a very special guest on the line right now as we are in the offseason right now. It is Combine Week right now in the 2020 offseason. And right here to discuss everything Steelers as far as trade, free agency, getting under the salary cap by the time the new league year starts on March 18th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be the start of the 2020-2021 NFL season, the 101st season of the NFL, which will officially celebrate 100 full seasons of the NFL, which is already in the book. And right now, like I said, join me on the line right now. We got currently right now the godfather of Pittsburgh Sports Talk Radio and host of Savran on Sports every Monday through Friday on ESPN Pittsburgh, 970 a.m. You can catch the show every Monday through Friday from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern. The one and only host, Stan Savran. You can follow him on Twitter at Stan Live Show. And then he's also got a Facebook page too, which is at Savran on Sports. And right now, and we're ready to start talking some Steelers football. And Stan, glad to have you on so far right now. It's been an interesting offseason to say the least. What do you think has been like the leading headline, aside from the Steelers not being in the playoffs, in your opinion?
Well, when you start about that, I mean, it certainly exacerbates things when it's 2 years in a row. But there were certainly vast differences between what happened in 18 versus what happened last season. And not that it was the only reason, but it was certainly a major reason. And they lost their quarterback. I think any team that loses its starting quarterback is going to be in for some trouble. Now, there are some exceptions. When the Eagles lost Carson Wentz, Nick Foles stepped in, Bridgewater did a nice job for Drew Brees. But so much of the offense centered around Ben. I mean, everything was centered around Ben. That may be true of most NFL teams, but more so with the Steelers. I mean, that was the focal point of the offense. Everything they did was centered around him. In 2018, they threw the ball 68% of the time, which in my view is way too much, but they did it because he was the quarterback, and he has also a lot of latitude in play calling because of his veteran status and because of his level of expertise and accomplishment. They pretty much let him change things, and why not? I think too often, frankly, Ben changed the passes because quarterbacks like to throw. They would rather throw than hand off. But be that as it may, when he went down, then you factor in that they really didn't have qualified or competent backups. Neither of their backup quarterbacks had ever taken an NFL snap. They were vulnerable in that regard. Doesn't mean that Mason Rudolph might not develop into a solid backup. Who knows, maybe even a starter. But when he was called upon, he just wasn't ready, even though he had them competitive for a while. So I think when you look at what happened to them, unfortunately, it coincided with the growth of the defense. And the defense had them in position to make the playoffs, but eventually they crumbled under the weight of having really no offense whatsoever.
And speaking of which, the stability, like you just mentioned a moment ago, and look, I mean, it's an encouraging sign to at least see Ben Roethlisberger at least starting to throw a football. I know Ron Cook of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, who's also the host of the Cook and Joe Show on 93.7 The Fan, said he was in texting with Ben Roethlisberger, and the hope was on Friday was to at least start doing some light throwing sessions, light tennis ball sessions. I saw the video released by Steelers Steelers.com on Saturday afternoon, and they said the more concern was about the spiral. But let's just say if something were drastic to happen to Ben Roethlisberger, let's just say if he had to be forced into retirement or they had to move ways, and he decided to step down this offseason, how much more confidence should Steelers feel? And I asked this with Chris McSorley a couple of weeks ago. He was my previous guest, is that Steelers fans and Steelers Nation should be a lot more confident knowing the fact he got stability in the front office, more particularly with Kevin Colbert, because he was a big question mark if he was going to stay on past this year's draft. So he'll be around past the 2021 draft as it stands right now. Say you.
Well, I mean, clearly it's good to have Kevin there. He's done a tremendous job. Again, a measure of stability. He's been the GM since 2000 and presided over 2 Super Bowl champions and a team that went to a third. If Ben were at the last minute, let's say, not just to announce a retirement, but his elbow doesn't comply, they are going to be short at quarterback. How many starting caliber quarterbacks are there out there? I mean, we have seen in all NFL cities what backup quarterbacks look like. And with very few exceptions, it's not an appetizing thought. They would, at that point, barring a major trade, and again, good quarterbacks aren't in abundance. They would have to hope that Mason Rudolph learned from his experience, and they'd have to go with him. I think he'd be better next year than he was this past year. He's got some experience. Obviously, he went through some tremendous trials and tribulations, but he's still not Ben. He's probably never going to be Ben. So they honestly believe that they are primed to make a strong bid in 2020, largely because of the return of Ben, and also because their defense really is one of the top 5 defenses in the NFL. And let's keep in mind, Charles, that defense did what they did largely without Stephon Tuitt, who was having a Pro Bowl year when he got hurt. Now, that's not to say that somebody else might not get hurt. I mean, you never know. Oftentimes, the team that wins the Super Bowl isn't the best team. It's the healthiest team when the playoffs roll around. And you also have to factor in that now Steven Nelson will be in his second year there. And also that Devin Bush, having had a year's experience, will be that much better. I mean, he's got a ways to go to get to where he's going to be where they thought he might when they drafted him. But again, I don't know that any defense, except for maybe the 76 Steelers defense, is going to be able to carry you a distance unless the offense is productive. Everybody suffered. The running game suffered because teams stacked the line of scrimmage because the quarterbacks were no threat whatsoever. They didn't have a tight end of any value whatsoever. James Conner's always hurt. I think they're looking to replace him at some point. But again, they can be effective offensively with Ben. And now, for the first time really in a long time, Ben can lean on a defense, which really since 2008, he really hasn't had a great defense.
But don't you think we still got to ease with the side of caution? I get it, having a healthy Ben Roethlisberger with a hot defense like the Steelers did last year. And I will say, it's been a long time since we've seen a Steelers defense do this good. I know guys like, I think Bud Dupree and TJ Watt. Well, no, not Bud Dupree. I meant Terrell Edmonds. They expressed frustration that they weren't doing great enough things on defense. They want to start pulling up a couple of shutouts this year. That was coming from TJ Watt to really make a statement. But given what all that being said, and with a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, who I always hold hesitation, listen, you're having this elbow one at 37 years old. You're doing this at a lot higher risk in late in your career, similar to Joe Montana, in my opinion, the way I look at it. And I'm not banking on it. But here's where my point comes in. Let's just say if Ben is healthy, can we honestly trust he's not going to be making the same mistakes as far as like turnovers in the red zone or costly turnovers that will cost them the game? Because remember, Steelers have many decent teams before. Granted, it was offense the last 6 years, but I think it still comes out in the winning that turnover ratio.
Well, he was for all the numbers he compiled, he did not have a good year in 18, even though they were 9-6-1.
Well, we could argue about the 5,000 plus passing yards too.
Yeah, but 18 turnovers, 18 interceptions, I should say. That's unacceptable. Frankly, I think there are two factors, I believe. Again, I think Ben was given way too much latitude. It was the first year that Randy Fiegler was the offensive coordinator. I think he deferred to Ben way too much. Certainly you want to rely on his expertise to read defenses and change plays, but I also think that 68%, I don't care who the quarterback is. I don't care if it's Brady. I don't care if it's Johnny Unitas. I don't care if it's Otto Graham. That's way too much passing. They've got to rely on their running game a bit more. Obviously, if you possess the ball and control the clock, you're helping your defense that way. And I also think the second part of 2018 and the 18 interceptions, I think that Antonio Brown, Ben knows, or he knew, that if he didn't get the ball to him, then there'd be pouting, there'd be acting up, there'd be the kind of behavior that we've come to expect. And maybe Ben's at fault for succumbing to all that, but he's trying to keep everybody happy. And I do think there were many times when he forced the ball to Antonio Brown in double and triple coverage. Obviously, that's not a factor any longer. That's not to take away poor decision-making by Ben, but he's also got to understand that even if he comes back 100% and the elbow's 100%, that he's also going to be 38.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't agree more. And speaking of which, real quick, let's swing things over to Antonio Brown and, of course, Le'Veon Bell. Beginning with Antonio Brown right now. Call me crazy, Stan, but is it ridiculous, out of the question to ask right now, considering his troubles right now? He's trying to get himself back together. I mean, we'll see on that. But for a guy who still wants to play football, and Rob Cook has even said, has been strong in his stance, he really feels like they're trying to do everything they can to keep him out of the league. You got the XFL going on right now. Do you think Antonio Brown could use that as a ploy right now to at least try and show some humbleness, rebuild his character, and show that he could start from scratch? Do you think that could something be beneficial for him right now if he's really looking to get back in the league?
I don't think Antonio Brown's got any ploys whatsoever. He's got no leverage at all whatsoever. If he ever comes back, he'll be 32. I'm sure he's got some skills left, but let's remember something, that even if an NFL team were to sign Antonio Brown and somehow be, I would say convinced, I would use the term hoodwinked into believing that his behavior is going to change, remember, he is currently under suspension by the NFL. And until these sexual abuse allegations are settled, he's not getting anywhere near the National Football League. Nobody's going to sign him knowing that if these things aren't settled properly, that he's going to get a suspension for 4 games, 8 games, who knows how long. If these things, and there are multiple accusations with him, nobody's going to touch him. I don't care if he goes out in the XFL and he scores a touchdown on every single play. There are hurdles for him to climb, and no NFL team A is going to open themselves up to a guy who is just an absolute powder keg. He can explode at any minute. We've seen that his behavior changes from day to day, from hour to hour, and also, even if you did sign him, he would then have to prove that he was innocent in multiple allegations. Not just one, there are multiple. Kind of makes you believe where there's smoke, there's a raging inferno.
We are being joined live right now by the Godfather's Pittsburgh Sports Talk Radio, Stan Savran. You can follow him at Stan. Love the show. And speaking of which, right now, let's get into another topic right now. Let's swing things over to the Steelers right now. As I just mentioned, we're pretty much less than 4 weeks away from the start of the new league year. There's reports last week that Artie Burns has now joined Javon Hargrave with agent Drew Rosenhaus right now. It's pretty much inevitable that both these guys are not going to be sticking around next year. I mean, you got contracts to deal with Bud Dupree and TJ Watt, and even Dale Lally was pointing out on DK Pittsburgh Sports. he was saying if the players were to approve this new proposed CBA, one of the factors could be is that TJ Watt could get both his 4th and 5th year option fully, which would make his rookie contract fully guaranteed in the 4th and 5th year as opposed to the 5th year. Given what those two players I just mentioned with Artie Burns, Javon Hargrave, which domino do you think will roll first between those two if you had to pick?
Well, they don't want Artie Burns. I mean, they don't want him. If they wanted him, they would have extended a contract and offered him another contract year. They would like to keep Hargrave, but the realities of the salary cap are not going to allow him to. It's not because they don't like him or they don't think that he played well, but they just may not be able to afford him for all the reasons that you mentioned. Artie Burns was one of the most colossal bust-outs in Steeler draft history. That entire draft was awful. Sean Davis is also a free agent. He was a 2nd-round pick. He's going to be out there on the market. They don't want him back either. They're in the market for a safety, but it's very telling that they don't want him back, or at least not at what he may earn. Again, Hargrave really developed nicely, and the thing that benefited Hargrave and his viability on the open market, he was drafted as a nose tackle, but he also showed when Tuitt got hurt that he could play outside. He could play some defensive end, and he wasn't a bad pass rusher. His versatility will be sorely missed, but that's what the salary cap is for. You know, like the Stones said, you can't always get what you want, and unfortunately, he's going to be a cap casualty. But again, Artie Burns, they couldn't wait to get rid of him.
No, I definitely couldn't agree more. And like I said, he only had like a career high 300 receptions, and that was in his rookie year and when he first came in the league, which was back in 2016. And right now, so let's do like a mock draft real quick. Let's just say if we get into the 2nd round, second day of the draft is here. The 49th overall pick in the 2nd round, Steelers select at which position do you feel?
Well, let me just, I'll preface it and put an asterisk. Any draft depends on what they do in free agency. I mean, some of the needs that they have could be filled in by a free agency. So, you know, that would change what they would draft. I think they definitely need help at tight end. McDonald has talent, but like they say, the best ability is availability, and he's always hurt. I would say this. I think one of the things that they most need to do in 2020 is improve that running game. And they're going to release Ramon Foster, cap casualty, and frankly, Ramon, great guy, great service. He's had it. His career's done. So he's going to be gone. They probably have other options. They could re-sign B.J. Finney, but I don't know they can afford him either. He's an unrestricted free agent. They would like to move. There's another option. Move Matt Filer from right tackle to left guard, and either use Chooks Okorafor or Zach Banner at right tackle. That's a possibility. But all things being equal, when you look at that offensive line, all of a sudden they're getting older. Pouncey's over 30. DeCastro's over 30. Villanueva's over 30. My number one pick would be an offensive guard, and it would not just be a guard. It would be a mauler, a run-blocking, physical, push people off the line of scrimmage guard. That, if he's there, I don't know, how deep that group is, and you never know how the draft falls. But since we're just talking about something that's not going to happen for a couple months, that's my number one priority.
No, and I definitely couldn't agree more, because I will say this. I mean, despite protecting the quarterback at times, the biggest thing that they got called out on a plethora of times this year was opening up some yardage for the running game, and pretty much a lot of stuff was affected. And that's why I really think with Randy Fichtner, I'm not sure if it was all that fair to really throw him under the bus, because remember, when you look back a year ago at this time, even when they had the talent they did, I mean, at least 2/3 of the killer bees with Ben and Antonio Brown and the rest of the team around, and Juju Smith-Schuster, who's doing real good backbone support. Remember, they were number one in the red zone in that area.
And, Connor had a good year. But again, as always, he got hurt. But they ran the ball much more effectively. And again, to take some of the onus off the offensive line and Randy, when you've got Duck Hodges at quarterback, he's a nice kid, but let's be honest. When you've got Duck Hodges at quarterback, what defense isn't going to put 8-9 up the line of scrimmage? They were daring him to throw. They wanted him to throw. And that doesn't leave any room to run the ball. So I don't think it's fair to judge the offensive line totally. But I also know that offensive line too often was giving up penetration. They were being pushed around. They weren't physical enough, mainly because I think they're too used to pass blocking, which is more of a passive maneuver as opposed to run blocking when you're firing out at the defense. I think they need to be a little bit more physical. Just having Ben back will help the running game. They could use another running back. But I always look, if you give me a good offensive line, I can take an average back and make them between average and good. If I've got blocking and I don't have defenses crowding the line of scrimmage.
All right, Stan. Well, before we wrap up here, I want to just see if we could just do a quick word association with a few guys. Great work always watching on Steelers.com and listening to your show from time on Savran Sports. And I know you just mentioned before we went on the air, you'll be having an interview with Jack Ham this Friday and Rocky Blyer this Monday, Steeler Nation. So make sure to pay attention to Steelers.com or their YouTube channel, Pittsburgh Steelers, to find out the latest videos. But real quickly, since you already did interview a few guys, let's begin with the one you interviewed like about over a month ago. If I were to give you word association, if you're telling me on this guy, Die Shell. Torpedo. Bill Cowher, surprisingly, the very first selection of the Hall of Fame, yet alone the Centennial class during the Ravens divisional loss. It was you got a double play for your money that way, bang for your buck. Bill Cowher, the chin. Intense. Troy Polamalu.
Remarkable.
Nice. Mike Tomlin.
Committed.
Vice President and GM still with the Steelers in this 21st season, Kevin Colbert.
Class.
And last but not least, I really do believe this guy needs to win a Super Bowl since it's been about 3 years since his dad, Dan Rooney, passed away. Arguably the greatest Steelers executive of all time for that franchise with 6 Super Bowl rings. Art Rooney, and then how important do you feel it is to win one in dedication to his dad and the family, his grandfather, Art Rooney, the chief, for that Steelers legacy? How important do you think it is to have one do it without those men in his life?
From my perspective, I think Art is very competent. He was a ball boy. He's been obviously with the Steelers all his life. I don't know that anybody will necessarily judge him as an owner, but I would imagine that not so much for what he thinks to evaluate his job. I think he would like to win one more to honor his father and his grandfather. Not so much for his glory, but I think that he would like to honor those who came, who preceded him, his dad and his grandfather. And I think he would like to offer that up to them and for them.
I get that. I guess the reason why I come at you with that, because a lot of people in the last few years will associate the drama within the team that they had to move on from, the level of talent with guys like Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, some of the locker room, and just some of the nonsense that's plagued them. But I really do believe, this year when you had a guy like Tomlin coach with such a short-handed hand that was dealt to him this past year, when you lose your quarterback for the first time for not a couple of weeks, the rest of the season, and to finish off 8-8 just short of the playoffs, I think that definitely says enough.
Well, I've always been a big believer in Mike Tomlin. There are people in Pittsburgh who don't like him for any number of reasons. I got pretty close with Mike. I was the host of his coaches show for a number of years, as I was with Bill Cowher for TV. And I think Mike is one of the most highly principled men that I've ever come across. He has a great passion for the game. He loves the game of football. I think that a lot of the criticism that he gets is unfair. Some of it justified, his clock management. But I would also offer this. People said, well, he should have won more Super Bowls because he had the killer bees. Do you realize that when Le'Veon Bell joined the team in 2013, all the rest of those years that Bell was there, that the killer bees played exactly 5 quarters of playoff football together? The whole team was built around those 3 guys offensively, but when the playoffs came around, because of injury, they played a grand total of 5 quarters of football together. And they were built to succeed, largely on the shoulders of those 3. Mike Tomlin can't control injuries.
Yeah. Hey, well, Stan, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I know I kept you on here a lot longer than you, and I wanted to have you on. It was such a pleasure, such a legend and a true champ and icon in Pittsburgh. Love watching your work. Listen to you on iHeartRadio, on your show, whenever you get the opportunity, your podcast. You can follow on Twitter at Stan. Love the show. You can click on the link right there. Hear all his podcasts on Savran on Sports. And, of course, the various magical work he does, especially on Steelers.com. He is the chairman of the Steelers Hall of Honor. Once again, follow him on Twitter at Stan. Love the show. And then you can also check him out on his Facebook page, too, at Savran on Sports. Stan, it's been a remarkable time having you. I hope we'll get in contact and chat again, my friend, and give him proper time. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Stan. God bless and best of luck to you. And there you have it. That was Stan Savran right there, the Godfather's Pittsburgh Sports Talk Radio. I'm not going to lie to you. Definitely enjoyed having that. It's as real as it gets with that guy. And, yeah, I just definitely – I think that's a very wise choice what he said right there. He's definitely looking at a guy, an offensive guard, to get in the first round of the draft with their very first selection, their second round, I should say, which would be their first selection, not first round, but you know what I mean. But anyway, I think that's just very telling right there. I mean, right now, when you got a guy like Stan Savran right now trying to do what Mike Munchak did when he was last there, who moved on to the Denver Broncos, you got to start to really wonder right now how much more pride he needs to restore the offensive line. And like I said, I'm not going to really totally bail on Fichtner just yet. I mean, he came in there towards the end of the 2017 season and was there in 2018. I mean, they had the best red zone numbers, but the problem was, like I said, I think Stan kind enough to remind everybody why was that. And a lot of people do believe when he had the talent like he did with Antonio Brown and others, since his departure of Juju Smith-Schuster, that there was going to be a little bit more friction of why are you throwing in tight coverages to your superstars are being baited in, I guess you could say. Anyway, guys, the phone lines and text line is open right now. Again, if you guys want to text into the show, please do so. This is the number. You can reach the Mouth Steel Podcast. It is 312-209-2232. Again, that's 312-209-2232. Definitely want to hear some phone calls if you guys want to. Please, phone lines are open. We got about 5 more minutes left to go. I'm going to give you guys about another 5 minutes. We also got a debut coming up here in just a moment. The 2-minute warning of the Mouth Steel Podcast. This will be my quick, rapid closing thoughts here in just a moment. But, I got to be honest with you. That's been some highlights of the season. Like I said, if the Steelers were not in the playoffs, I'm so glad to at least see guys like Bill Cowher, Don Shell, and thank God a lot of people felt like Troy Polamalu was pretty much close to a no-brainer getting in the Hall of Fame this year on his first attempt, first battle Hall of Famer. Congratulations once again to Troy Polamalu. And you look at it right there. Oh my gosh, that is like 30 members altogether for the Steelers representing Canton, and we got a lot more stuff to go. Remember, this week just started off the NFL Combine right now. And one of the things, let's get into it right now. We're going to get into the 2-minute warning right now here in the Meta Steel Podcast debut segment. And speaking of which, I was talking about this on my show on Saturday that I do here in Chicago. If you guys ever want to check it out, I got the page tagged. It is chicagolandsportsradio.com. Press the like button. If you guys ever want to search page, just type in chicagolandsportsradio.com or at chicagolandsportsradio.com. You can find the Facebook page for all our talent and shows right there. That is, you can see all the shows that start Monday through Saturday. I host that show on deck on CSR, aka chicagolandsportsradio.com, from 1 to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, in case you guys are wondering. And let's get into some other stuff right now. The CBA, and this was a very good read here and a report here by Dale Lally of DK Pittsburgh Sports, who really did a good job outlining stuff. I know one of the first things that people heard, and this was mentioned on Thursday when this was getting proposed, was the expansion of the regular season that owners have been wanting for the last few years now, where they want 17 games. They want to have a 17-game season. And I know a lot of players are still very adamant about playing extra. They feel like they got to give a little bit more extra just to see some of the money that they are trying to make. But I think there's a few little interesting things that I like in here that I really think could be beneficial to the players. I mean, let's get into one of the number one things, aside from the revenue, I mean, that we found out, if they were to accept it, it would go from 48 to 48.5%, nearly $5 billion being swung towards the players' union. As we're currently aware, when it comes to the NFL CBA, as far as the representatives for the Pittsburgh Steelers, currently you got for the Union Board of Representatives for the Steelers, you got offensive lineman Ramon Foster on here who represents them. Not so sure if he's going to be sticking around. More than likely he's going to be moving on. But if he were to move on, the second guy, the co-alternate, that would be Cam Hayward. He would be the guy, it looks like he would be the go-to guy if they were to move on from Mo Foster. He'd be representing the Steelers. The guy that'd be backing him up would be Vince Williams, as we look at it. And here's some of the other things too. Aside from the revenue being swung up to 48.5%, one significant thing that could really help out the players, I mean, in this situation, check this out. They could benefit from the gambling money. I mean, where the NFL makes money off of gambling, where it's like FanDuel or whatever, where these actual people want to put money on their fantasy football. Think of this real quick. When the league taps into that new revenue source, it'll be added directly to the players' take of the pie, as it'll be included in all league revenue. That's right, gambling. So any bets that people were making was for their fantasy football or on the games, I would imagine that is something the players could benefit big time off of. I mean, I got to imagine. I mean, how do you help make the sport grow? How do you attract the popularity? Obviously, a lot of people love putting money, so doing their fantasy lives or betting on games. I mean, since sports gambling has been legalized for almost 2 years. And I want to say that was in effect of May of 2018, if memory serves me correctly. But that is a huge little tidbit I think players could definitely think about right there. Also, too, here's another one that players may like in here. As we're in the 2-minute warning segment, they could also have a neutral decision maker to disciplinary issues aside from Roger Goodell. As everyone is aware, there's been a lot of players frustrated. We can get into names and go down the list from the past about so many disgruntled players feeling that Roger Goodell, since they signed the last CBA back in August of 2011, on the heels of missing the Hall of Fame game in Canton, what's one of the things that they got suckered into was granting Roger Goodell all final say-so and invoking his authoritarian disciplinary power. I mean, his perspective. I think if you're going to have a new CBA, that's one thing that needs to be on neutral ground. Definitely for sure. I mean, I'm always all for, a league that they want to see players keep maintaining a good, respectable lifestyle that'll be influential to a lot of people. Because face it, you want to keep yourself clean at all phases. But at the same time, too, we just never know how some of that stuff can be a little murky. And a lot of these guys do get controversially suspended. I know a few years ago, like almost 6 years ago, Adrian Pearson, with his child right there. Disciplining his child the way he did. That got out to the service at the not sit will of Roger Goodell. He had a lawyer in court, and everything seemed to be all right, but he still had to face punishment for that. And the way they do a lot of these random testing for positive marijuana testing. That's another thing, too, right there, because here's another thing. Speaking of the marijuana, there will also be a reduction in the fines charged for on-field offenses, which also basically eliminates suspensions for testing positive for marijuana. Players would still be tested, but the threshold, according to Dale Lally, for a positive, that would be raised considerably, while the number of players and the time frame in which they can be testing would both be reduced. That'd be another interesting ploy. Since it's barely starting to become legal in different states, you still got, I think Ohio is one of them, where people still pay the piper for that, for even just smuggling it. So you take all that into effect right there, and you start to wonder, I think that is very stuff right there. The Steelers could, the people around the league and the players could look at, right there as something that could breathe a little easier and be something they could benefit off of. I would not be surprised. Here's another stipulation from the CBA too that could be enticing to the players. Despite having to give them an extra game, but also expand playoffs too. I know that was already mentioned there. I discussed that on my On Deck show. Check out my Mixcloud channel. That is Charles the Prodigy Richey. You can look me up right there. You can hear my thoughts, especially with the expanded playoffs, where it would only be one team in each conference getting the bye as opposed to top two. I would be assuming that's got to be the team with the best record that definitely gets that bye. But it'll be all together now. You'd be having 6 teams in the wild card round, which would be, pretty crazy. I really start to wonder if they would invoke a Monday night game where you have at least your 3 games on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and then your final one on a Monday. Do it on a primetime stage, in my opinion. I think that'd be an idea to consider right there. Do that for the playoffs. Why not a Monday night playoff game? I think where that happens, it's still a week before, I think, the college football championship. I don't think there'll be any bowl games around there. I know you'd be running that risk, but I think that's one thing I'll look into. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Also, too, here's another tidbit in the CBA. The trading also will be affected. Currently, teams have a 2-day acclimation period when they start training camp before they can have a full pad practice. Under this offer, that would be increased to 5 days of acclimation. So that's another thing players, I think, definitely been a little frustrated with was the time. So you'd be having a little bit more added rest, I guess you could say. And then also, too, rosters will be increased from 53 to 55 players. And then, as I was talking with Stan Savran, you just heard me a few moments ago, fully contracts that are usually guaranteed at the 5th season for first-round draft picks. Well, if they accept it, that could be in their 4th year. In this case, T.J. Watt. T.J. Watt, who's going into his 4th year as a Steeler, if they were to come to an agreement, the rest of his remainder of his contract would be fully guaranteed for 2020 and 2021. So that's going to do it right there for this edition of the Metal Steel Podcast. I just want to say thank you once again, Stan Savran, for joining me here on the Metal Steel podcast. You couldn't have been any more genuine or any nicer chatting with you. It was a fun interview, and I hope we can do this again down the road. Definitely made this a memorable experience, in my opinion. And once again, you can always check me out here Mondays and Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you guys want to find the Metal Steel podcast page on my Facebook, that is Metal Steel Podcast. Hit the like button. Then you can simply type next time at Metal Steel Nation. That's capital M, capital S, capital N. You can also check me out on Instagram. Oh, wait, I also got another Facebook page that ties in with my show. That is On Deck. Once you click the like button on there, you can just also type at On Deck CSR. That's capital O, capital D, and all caps for the remaining 3 initials CSR. You can also check me out on Instagram, which I'm streaming live off right now. Metal Steel Nation. On Deck CSR. Then you can also check me out on my YouTube channel, Metal Steel Podcast. And once again, if you guys want to hear podcasts of the Metal Steel Podcast that I usually finish up here, look me up on Mixcloud, Charles the Prodigy Richey. For Charles the Prodigy Richey and for Stan Savran signing off, this is the Metal Steel Podcast. As I always say, don't be trolling, be rolling. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. I gone.